You know, there are some names that just echo through history. They're whispered in the dark, and they become synonymous with pure terror. And for well over a century, one name has pretty much defined the very idea of the unsolved, brutal serial killer. And that name is Jack the Ripper. Yeah, pretty chilling stuff, right? That's from the infamous Dear Boss letter. This is the piece of mail that literally gave a monster his name, taunting the police, terrifying an entire nation. But here's the thing. This letter, the very origin of the whole legend, it holds a secret, a pretty big one, and we are absolutely going to uncover it. So that brings up the big question, doesn't it? Why are we still so obsessed with this? I mean, it's a 130-year-old cold case, but it's so much more than that. It's a story about a city, about the birth of modern media, and of course, about a killer who became a legend. So let's get into it. Let's see exactly how that legend was built, piece by piece. Okay, first things first. To even begin to understand the killer, you have to understand his hunting ground. So, we're going to go back in time, back to the dark, foggy, gaslit streets of Victorian London's East End. So, here we are, Whitechapel, 1888. And let me tell you, this was not the London you see on postcards. Not even close. Whitechapel was this maze of overcrowded slums. We're talking crushing poverty, constant social unrest. It was a place where life was incredibly cheap, and the shadows, well, they could hide anything, or anyone. And to give you a sense of just how desperate things were, get this, 55%. That number represents the percentage of children in the East End who died before they even turned 5. Just let that sink in. It's a staggering figure that tells you everything you need to know about how fragile life was back then. And you know, that kind of desperation, it forces people into absolutely impossible situations. The police at the time estimated there were about 1,200 women working as prostitutes just in the Whitechapel district. For so many of them, it wasn't a choice. It was literally the only way to earn enough money to maybe see the next day. So what could that daily survival get you? Well, about 4 pence. That was the price for a coffin bed in one of the lodging houses. And no, that's not a real bed. We're talking about a wooden box, sometimes just a rope strung across a room to lean on. Just think about that. This was the incredibly vulnerable world the Ripper's victims had to navigate every single night. And it's into this bleak, desperate world that a killer emerges. For just a few short months in 1888, a spree of murders, so brutal it was immediately dubbed the Autumn of Terror, would paralyze London and give birth to a legend that's still with us today. All right, take a look at this timeline. These women are known as the canonical 5. They're the victims that almost everyone agrees were killed by the same person. It all starts at the end of August, and it's over by early November. I mean, that's less than 3 months. The speed of it, the brutality, you can just imagine the citywide panic it created. But it wasn't just random violence. There was a horrifying pattern. The brutality escalated with each murder. It starts with Ann Nichols, and it's awful. But by the time he gets to Annie Chapman, he's removing organs. Then with Eddowes, a kidney is gone and her face is mutilated. And then Mary Jane Kelly. Her murder was so savage, so total, it's almost indescribable. This progression is what led to that terrifying theory that the killer had some kind of medical knowledge. Maybe he was a surgeon. So while this killer is stalking the streets of Whitechapel, there are 2 huge forces at work, both shaping the story in real time. On one side, you have the police, desperately trying to catch him. And on the other, you have the press, realizing they had a story that could sell to the entire world. And it was a totally uneven battle. Look, the police were doing a massive amount of work, interviewing thousands, investigating hundreds of suspects. But they had nothing like the forensics we have today. They were basically flying blind. Meanwhile, you have this media frenzy. Cheap newspapers were a new thing, and this story, it was gold. They were selling over 1 million copies a day, and they were filled with sensationalism, false leads, and, as we're about to find out, straight-up hoaxes. This brings us to probably the most crucial point of the whole legend. Where did that name Jack the Ripper even come from? You'd think a witness, right? Or maybe a nickname the police gave him. Nope. It came from a letter. And here's the kicker. It wasn't sent to the police. It was sent directly to a news agency. Okay, so police were flooded with hundreds of letters, but these 3 are the ones that became totally iconic. You've got the Dear Boss letter, which coined the name, the Saucy Jackie postcard, which seemed to know things only the killer would know. And then, the most infamous of all, the From Hell letter. It actually arrived with a small box, and inside was half of a human kidney. It's this correspondence that created the myth of this intelligent, taunting monster who was playing games with the police. But, and this is the secret that changes everything, police officials back then, and most Ripper experts today, believed that the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie postcard were complete fakes. The theory is they were written by a journalist to sensationalize the story and, you guessed it, sell more newspapers. Just think about that. The most famous serial killer in history probably didn't even name himself. The media did. And then, just as suddenly as they started, the killings stopped. The killer was never caught. He just vanished. But his impact, which was supercharged by the press, would end up changing society forever. And yeah, to this day, the case is completely unsolved. Did he die? Did he get locked up for something else? Did he just stop? We have no idea. And honestly, the silence he left behind was almost as terrifying as the murders themselves. It created this huge vacuum that was immediately filled with endless theories and speculation. But the Ripper's shadow, his legacy, is very, very real. In a strange way, the horror of the crimes forced people to look at the poverty in the East End, which actually led to social reforms. He basically became the prototype for the celebrity serial killer, creating the whole true crime media template we're still using today. And of course, he spawned this massive cottage industry of ripperologists, people still trying to solve the puzzle. And even back then, some people saw the Ripper as something more than just one man. Check out this cartoon from Punch magazine. It's called The Nemesis of Neglect. It shows the killer as this phantom, this ghost, basically saying he was a monster born from society's failure to care about its poorest people. That is a really terrifying thought, isn't it? Which really leaves us with one final, haunting question. After all this, what was Jack the Ripper? Was he a single evil mastermind stalking the fog? Or was the legend that we all know today a totally different kind of monster? One that was created, pieced together, from real horror, yeah, but also from a desperate city and a hungry press that figured out a terrifying story is really, really good for business. And that is the true anatomy of this legend.